Let's see if this.
And if you don't mind, for your own recording purposes,
yeah.
But tell me what you're thinking. Tell me what you're doing. Tell me what kind of choices present themselves. This is a media form that I basically know nothing about, so you will not insult my intelligence by like explaining things. Yeah.
So I guess. Oh, is it? Okay, there it is. So, what is it? So I guess I'm not really sure what other people normally stream.
Yeah.
But I get the sense that it's usually it's someone of skill who like knows how to play a game really well, or like really fast. And so they're just playing the game, and then there's a bit of a chat so that people can put input in.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're really popular, they don't really see it. So it's more of like putting on a performance of like skill. But for smaller streams, there's more of the ability to have discussion. So that's one of the things I really like is that I'll just be talking about like my thought process as I'm solving this, and then they'll be like chiming in. And sometimes the discussion just goes to like personal stuff. It's not really related to the game.
But sometimes it's also people offering help or insight or like a different interpretation.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. That's cool. So there's one model that's about virtuosity and performance, and there's another model that's about like collaboration and sort of like more like a ludic kind of back and forth game, right? Like they're sort of playing with you, like
like as if they're sort of like people on the couch like watching you play.
That's cool.
And so when I'm with Mahitibel, we tend to play more artsier games. So like this one, for example, and it's about like we're just talking about like media studies stuff, and then like some people chime in with discussion questions or like sort of laughing because we're not playing super well.
I like the sort of like Marxist premise of what's going on here.
But so the game starts off. So this is called Antichamber, and you can see I'm in sort of this room, and this is how the game starts. Like when I started up, it was actually it was this one. Like this is all I had, and it was just like okay. So I'm using the keyboard to move, and I'm using the mouse to sort of like direct my gaze. So like I saw this, and then I came to here. And so it's got the controls and stuff like that. And then there was this countdown, but when it ended, it was just another thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go back to the wall sort of menu.
Yeah. So this is also like weird for a game because usually like the menu is sort of something you go outside of the game to do. Like you have a menu and you pause the game in order.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is the game always in good faith? Like if it says your progress is saved automatically, are there games where like that's actually not true?
Yeah, there is.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting.
I think so. Okay. So then like we had this map. So there's also here, but like when you go there seems to be like some wall or something that you can't go behind. So if I can find.
How are you navigating with the keyboard?
So it's just like these keyboard.
Okay.
The arrow keys, except they translate it here.
Got it.
Yeah. So okay. So this was the first room that was available. We didn't have this gun. That was something that we found, but we also don't know if it's a gun. We're just kind of calling it that. So we start out in this room. Like you can see here, there's like already some weird. Yeah. So this is the color things I was trying to talk about. You see, it's not. It's
not continuous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can see like there's this red circle and there's this purple line. It's just not staying confined, and it's also sort of affecting like this gun, which is. Yeah. Yeah,
I mean, it has that kind of like splotch look instead of actually being constrained by line or shape, which is actually weird, right? Because in some ways, this is also the quantity of like missing color from right here, almost like it's getting sort of like pulled into the object. Yeah.
Let me see if I can get sound working. I guess it might just be a quiet point. So this was the one where I was at, and originally it said jump, right? So I would look down, So I'd look down, and there seemed to be like, same sort of thing. Like it's not really the wall that's being colored. It's just that there's this color existing in space.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like flooding outwards. So originally this said jump. But like when you walk across, there seems to be like, this. The ground is coming out under your feet, right? But when I jump, this stops happening, and so you can kind of hear like there's this falling noise. Yeah, reduce the volume. So you kind of hear like this sort of seascape kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. The sound here is like very strange. So you've got like
I like the sort of like natural. location in the midst of obviously a highly abstracted sort of
like super
diagrams
sterile.
and
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
I want to definitely go find the art gallery that I found, because like there's one game that this seems to be drawing a lot from called Portal, which is like a sterile lab space, and you're like being kind of experimented on. But I was just really happy when I saw the art gallery, because that's like, you know, the white box and like directly.
Yeah.
So
it's also interesting, right? Because the aspect ratios of these things, I told you I had nothing to say, but of course, right, I'm more than happy to talk about it. I don't know anything about it, but the aspect ratios also keep, this is very televisual, obviously.
Yeah.
And the aspect ratios, it's very interested in the square, not really like the rectangle. I mean, it likes the box form, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting.
So that's also interesting that you mentioned like a box, because so the thing that this gun does is actually like at some points it takes boxes out of the environment and sort of like allows you to position them elsewhere. And now that you mention it, it's definitely like interested in the square. So like sometimes you see things like this, where it's like, you know, a cutesy little picture, and then like if you click it, it tells you something that's sort of related to what you just did, right? Of like, oh, you fell down, but it's like, it doesn't mean failing to progress. But then
will it say the same thing every time?
There's different pictures and different phrases. But also, if you look at the picture, this is a pretty dark quote to pair with this picture, right? Like, failing to succeed does not mean failing to progress, but it's like a lamb like committing suicide.
Well, like lambs going to their slaughter, right? It also feels sort of like allegorically overdetermined. You know?
Yeah. And like, so some of these just sort of play it straight. Like the picture at the beginning was like a fetus, and it's like the beginning, whatever. But then there's like another one, which is a man sort of like, his house is on fire, and he's like distraught, you know, on the road to it. And the quote there is, you know, sometimes things aren't the way that we left them.
Well, you know, the other thing it looks like, since I have it here as an example, right, this is Andy Warhol's Revolver series. And Andy Warhol's Revolver series, where he would take either revolvers or he would take execution pictures and things like that, he would do coloration to them. It's awfully, like,
yeah,
it reminds me of what's happening there. I mean, this is meant to also be the sight of a gun. It's also being given this kind of like pop art, sort of like color field language that also belies the violence there. So the aesthetic seems to be doing both of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And see, like like the color of the gun is also definitely affected by its surroundings. And this is sort of like, if this was actually like a dark room and not just black, I guess it's more obvious when I'm just in like a black sort of square rather than in a tunnel, because then this, but like even still
here though, completely in a dark room.
No, because like it doesn't seem
dark.
It doesn't seem like dark is affecting it. It seems like, you know, like the color black is affecting it, which is something kind of strange.
Which is totally what we talked about in relation to Cranaway, right? The autonomy of color in 20th
century
painting, right? The color force actually gets sort of dehissed from objects and can move on its own. So the object stability of like the sort of like, I don't know, the rigorous circle of the gun is constantly be getting acted on by color, which is navigating the space just as much as it is, which is weird.
Right. And I think like that idea of that the other things have autonomy, and like, because also space, like that example of like you would walk and like it would be fine, but if you jumped then you would fall through.
Yeah.
The idea that like space is not really like working with you or like to any rules, I think is another thing this game plays with.
Yeah.
So I can go from any room and press escape, and then return to this main antechamber, which is another thing that's not really.
And this is the map that you would then choose to, like, you would decide where to go based on this?
Well, so I actually found this room originally, and I didn't have the map. It's only after I've sort of explored the space that I found stuff. So let's see. Let me try to find that art gallery. Oh yeah, so this is interesting. So this is in that trailer I showed you. These are sort of the stairs that don't lead anywhere.
I want to look at the polarized glasses.
Yeah. So like, you can see like where I came. Oh, actually, it's still here. Yeah. So this is where I came from. Again, like, look, it's so strange. Yeah. So when I walked to this area,
you know what it looks like? It looks like those solar flares, right? I mean, what it looks like is not a color that's mapped onto an ontology, like a world. It looks like a kind of perceptual distortion. You know, like you looked at the sun and you looked back into the screen, looked red.
And it's like the after image.
Exactly.
That's interesting.
And that fuzzy line, right, is exactly what you're talking about. The fact that it's a perceptual problem for looking at objects.
Yeah. So I went in there, and then I come back to the same place, right?
What happens if you click on those paintings?
Oh, it's the same like a quote appears. So like choice may be as simple as going left or going right, and it's like the coin game. Yeah. And then the choice doesn't matter if the outcome is the same. And so this one, but then also if I try to go backwards through the space, you know, it's like, right, that doesn't make sense because we just went down the stairs and back up.
Yeah.
So actually, like, I think when I went through this for a while and I tried to go backwards, it wouldn't let me go back.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was forced to go in here and then, like, escape back to the main antechamber. So then back here. So, yeah. And so then you can see, right, like, there's that.
I deeply wanted. Sorry,
yeah.
I deeply want to do a reading of the different names of the rooms because they're not equivalent. They're really weird, like asymmetrical relations. So there's Logic 101, and then there's Many Paths to Nowhere, and then like what's Into Darkness. So they're not. They're very strange because some of them seem highly like cartographic, right? Like they're about like movement, and then Logic 101 isn't. So it's weird that they're. I can't.
I think it's part of it's like part of what you're doing with the game. So like this one is sort of that pedestal is where I got the gun, and then so the rest of the things are kind of like more tutorial about what's going in, and then like this one, like Many Paths to Nowhere, is kind of like what, right? And you see there's no record of like that weird spatialness in this map.
Yeah.
I also haven't like played the game like fully. This is sort of my second playthrough as well. Going through, but there's nothing about that spatial weirdness.
You lose two things, right? Because the schematic, which is super reductive, is simply a kind of like relative position in space. So you lose the question of color and the spatial disorientation. So it seems like those two get mapped onto each other.
Oh, yeah, that's it. Because like in this room, it's completely like a black and white. Same thing with the interest in like the cube.
Yeah.
In this room. Yeah. Let's see.
See the gallery.
Oh yeah, I'm trying to find the gallery.
No, this is very cool. What happens to the edges of the world, like those two arrows on the right side?
I think that means that you can, like, I could keep going this way, and that there'd be more to explore. Oh, this is really cool. Okay. Oh, I'm close to the art gallery, but right. So I look in here and I see like this blue field inside here, right? But if I like walk around, there's nothing here. It's just like the same room, and it's also green in here, right? So what to do is I like walk forward until like this is just completely my field of view, and then when I walk back,
that's so cool.
Yeah.
I love the contagion of color, right? That like if you get too close to it, the entire perceptual field is colored. Although there are these weird exceptions, which again, cinema nerd that I am, I can't help but they look exactly like projection, like light.
Especially since they're like circular.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. It reminds me of like expanded cinema, like cinema that's just like projecting light into like space in a museum, because what this is doing, and then it's projecting the color, except that the color somehow has a materiality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's actually sort of required to go past this room because you see like let's see, when I was walked out into the red space, right, it didn't. There's no pathway there.
Yeah.
So then if I like, man, when I first saw this, I was so, yeah.
But it's quite beautiful, right? I mean, because it's also doing that kind of like fantasy of being enveloped by color, right? It's also like letting color be seductive, like the walking up to its perceptual field, letting it like dominate it, and then being surrounded by it. Is
I mean, I think it's also
that fall into color, yeah.
For the game's question, it's also interesting because like when I didn't have this gun, this is something that I got later, right? So it would just be this would be gone, and it would just be a complete like color field.
Yeah.
Which was interesting because most games at least like try to like give you a texture or something so that you don't normally feel this. This wouldn't work in other games.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was close to the gallery when I was out here. Let me try to find it. So apparently I was going through this game like backwards because usually this sort of like description of this is sort of a hint of what you need to do, right? So when you look at it, it's like a few steps backwards may keep you moving forwards. So if I look forward at this, this wall falls down. But if I go backwards, it's like it's not being it's not being seen, so it doesn't like fall down on me. So apparently at one point,
I mean, that's interesting, right? So when you see it, it falls down. When you see the color too close, it like obliterates, or it sort of takes over the world.
Yeah.
So like, the world becomes what we see, right? It gives a lot of like autonomy to like perceptual power to like remap things. That's interesting. I have no idea that's the cool game. It's the first game I've ever watched be played.
Well, okay, this is not at all like. So
I'm totally happy to extrapolate from it because
yeah, this is definitely like more of like an avant-garde game.
Yeah. No, I love it. It's beautiful, but
yeah,
but it's interesting, right? Because because it's less about like a kind of like I don't know kinesthetic exploration than like a perceptual exploration than sort of like literally colors the world, you know?
Yeah.
It reminds you about like large scale Rothko that like you approach and it starts to take over your perceptual range of vision. And so it's sort of like fall into like pure abstraction, which is really interesting because it's also giving the opposite of abstraction in things like the schematic diagram and things like that. I mean, it's a different kind of abstraction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Because like, I just think it's interesting about this thing of order as well because like so I only knew this because my viewers were watching, right? And so one thing that says that you're going through the game backwards because those pictures are supposed to give you a hint about what you're supposed to do, sort of couched in this like again abstract language.
Yeah.
But then like since we were going through obstacles and then seeing the message, like it's weird that people were saying that we were going through this game backwards when it's like very much a non-linear game, right? Like you come to here and you've got like all these paths to go down.
Well, that's part of why I asked if it's sort of a reliable narrator, right? Because there's no reason why you can't sort of engage them retroactively. They're also, they're cryptic enough.
Right, yeah. And what was the other thing? They said that we hadn't found the main mechanic yet after we'd been playing for like 30 minutes. And I'm still not really sure what the main mechanic is in this game other than like maybe this gun. Because it's phrased as a puzzle game rather than a pure art game.
Yeah.
Which means that, so you could view each of those little pictures as sort of, like a reward for completing a puzzle or for like figuring it out or like exploring to a certain level. Whereas more normally like art games is really just more about the experience that you're going through. And then so like it's funny because a lot of like your average gamer would feel like that's an insult because they're like, I'm just watching a movie being played. Yeah. Which I think is also funny about like where do the lines of media sort of cross. Right? Yeah. Yeah. So. So this is the art gallery.
Cool.
Yeah, and so like how again the cubes, right? And then how in each of them there's sort of something going on, but
they're also impossible spaces, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think these are really cool, and you can see there's something like. Yeah, again with like the cheery picture being paired with like the really weird like kind of dark quote. There's like these monsters and stuff
also
like that.
Right, the color tonality, right? It's neon. It has a super high saturation of like the color has a lot of like white in it and has a lot of brightness to it. So it's also strange. Although you also I don't know, this sort of looks like a crab, and it also kind of looks like a protruding hand. Like it's right, like it's like classical form that's also sort of like obscene, but it also has that sort of projected eye.
Yeah.
We see cubes.
Rotating. Let's see. Oh yeah, this one was really cool. Because again, like when you get to zoom in straight up, right. So then it's just like, maybe I'm just in the game of like floating icosahedrons, right? Like. If I just...
This reminds me of, like, the screensavers when I was a young kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's actually interesting, right? That here, go back to that one for a second. Yeah. Go all the way in, so it's your entire perceptual field. When you back up, there's no effect on the exterior space. So it's also like the museum is letting frames actually be sort of like containing elements, right? Because here, color doesn't actually seem to be bleeding or leaking. For example, the green one in the back right.
Oh, yeah.
Like the green is actually contained very visibly, like in the border of the frame there. So the frame is doing its sort of function of sort of segregating the work of art right from the space there, which is not how color has been functioning historically in relation to line. So it's like the line of the frame is not like the lines of other things. Yeah. I think that's right. I'm not sure if that holds for everything.
Oh, so for most of these things it does. Although here there's no, it's more of like a picture, right? Like there's no like sense of volume in this, other than like
We'll get closer.
other than like the implication of like, you know, space reaching back. Same thing with those like icosahedrons.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, it's interesting which ones look like screens and which ones look like receiving spaces.
Yeah. Oh, so then there's this space where you're like, oh, like this seems to be, but then you can actually step through the frame. We were really excited when we found that.
That's cool.
What was this? You know, again, like some obscure quotes. So I haven't gotten past this room, so I'm not really sure what to make of it. But like first off, and then one thing that Mahidabel and I were talking about was like the thickness of this line. Sort of like also creates a frame, right, of the things in there, because and most of the lines have been like the sort of thin, yeah,
although there's also something kind of a muck with them, right, because they don't have the same neatness of edges until you get really close, like they're sort of jagged. They're like, you know what I mean, like they have like an uneven border there.
Oh, that's even more interesting because sometimes there'll actually be things that look like they're hand drawn, sort of appear. Of like, and from like a digital art perspective, like you could make these lines like feel much straighter, but so there's an intentional choice to not use like the sort of like vector aspect of the media,
which is consistent with the like color bleed, right? The kind of like diffusion of like the edges of the color, which is funny, right? Because I mean, it's funny to see it with the game because I associate that with like certain kinds of like outsider art, but it's about sort of like the sort of the spontaneity of the gesture, right? The spontaneity of colors that it sort of flows over line and things like that. And it really looks like imprecise watercolor, which is a very strange thing to digitally create. Yeah.
Because actually, this is probably harder than just like filling in, the individual things. Like there is sort of. Yeah. So I'm not sure what to make of this because it's again like. There seems to be like this maze aspect, and I don't know if I'm like supposed to solve it or not.
Leave the green behind.
Well, I can go out here, and then I'm back to sort of right. So this leads to the art gallery. This is the blue area, and this is the green area. So like if I go this way, then I'm probably gonna go back to where I was.
Yeah.
So
wait. So you're in the space. How do you know what you need to do?
I don't.
Okay.
Yeah. That's just sort of guessing because I haven't really. Oh, okay, so all of these, maybe this way. I'm really just guessing. I don't really know how this space works. Like, it seems to be a dead end because, again, just guessing because it's like, oh, it's all white. Maybe this is going to be like the same T intersection I went before.
Do you know where you are on the big map right now?
No, I could go back and check it out.
And it would tell you?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, so it is a maze. So I've come out to here, and let's see what this says. If you never stop trying, you'll get there eventually. Okay. So this is actually an area I haven't been before, but I can show you really quickly. So like this circle, yeah. So okay. So you can see like each of the intersections. So like this one was the one that had like the four-way.
The light coming through the frame.
Yeah. So this is, I guess, the point where we entered in to the picture frame, and then this is where I am currently. So this is telling me like where I've been before.
Okay, I'll be quiet while you go back there, and then you can.
No. So I can just like click through here. I think it's interesting actually that the art gallery is not a location that I can visit, because I was looking for it and I couldn't find it. Also, like more weird things with the map. So you remember this one is the one where we like walked across versus jumping across.
Yeah.
But like so. Where's the room where we fall down? Okay, let me just really quickly go through here. Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Can I ask you absurd questions?
Yeah.
How do you know when you're done with the game?
Like so for most games, right? There's like sort of some ending, like phase, right? Like you save the princess, or I don't know, you've solved all the puzzles or something like that. But I mean, that's also true, right? There's like some games that like intentionally don't end. So there's one game like The Sims. You've heard
Yeah.
it? Like you're just playing through a life. So you kind of choose when you want to be done with it.
Okay.
Right? Yeah.
So it's more about like fatigue or a kind of exhaustion of curiosity, things like that.
Yeah, definitely.
What do you think this is going to be like? How will this end?
I think first off, there's going to be like I'm going to be able to fill this grid.
Okay.
Because that's like solving the puzzles.
Got it.
It would be interesting if there was some explanation for what's going on. Let me show you this part. Wait, so where are we now?
Like the one that you told me about with the papers, and then you find out that you've been sort of like.
Oh, so that one has like a definite end.
Yeah. Yes, it does.
Well, because for that one, it's it's like every day you kind of go through.
Okay.
Right. And then some like strange out of the ordinary things happen. Like someone from like the rebellion like comes and like tries to convince you to go, or you like eventually try to take your family out of the country because you're tired of living there. And so there's these multiple endings, and you could try to like go for them all, but that's sort of the end. And I'm not sure like what happens if you just keep doing your job normally and like ignoring all of the strange things that happen.
Fascinating question. Yeah.
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 But I mean, in general, right? Like I guess it's sort of like a sense of boredom. Like you feel like this game has nothing to offer you, or like other things become more interesting.
Yeah.
So one thing that I always feel really interesting is in terms of mainstream games, like there's always sort of this cycle of like bigger and newer games coming out. To the point where like people might not be finished going through. Maybe they like to 100% a game. But then when they like see something newer coming out, now it's all the hype about that one. It's also pretty common for people to have like large libraries of games, especially on the computer, where they like haven't played some of them. They just like saw a good deal and like heard good things, and they sort of accumulated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. I mean, I know you said that this is not like a purely avant-garde one, but I also feel like the color gives this kind of like visceral aesthetic pleasure. That means that even if you've been in a space before, it's still quite sort of like lovely to experience. So it's interesting if the entire thing were in like black and white and we're purely about the schematic sort of like navigation of space. I feel like it would also become exhaustible in a sort of like faster way.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. I think. Yeah.
Here, go back to the weird room with the one that you hadn't been to before.
Let me try to find it. What's this one? Yeah. So I haven't been here before, so I don't know what's going on. So I guess we already see. I mean, this is interesting, is that they have like a little bit of a 3D aspect to it. So let's. Oh, is this actually just the?
Is it just a circle, like a semicircle?
Yeah, except I don't like. I seem to probably have like gone all the way around.
Okay.
And like not like come back to where I was.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's see. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I don't know if I can like progress past this point. Otherwise, yeah. So if I escape and like look at the map, like maybe, right? Like it.
There's something beyond it though. There's like a little box to the left.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know, right? Like same thing with the maze one that we just solved. Like I wasn't sure if like, oh, is there actually a way out of here? Or is it just like returning back to the same spot?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm trying to. So I think so. This is the room where we got sort of the gun from, and I think.
And sorry, will you humor me?
Yeah.
So what makes you think it's a gun?
It looks similar to a previous game.
Okay.
And I think also, it's mostly that it looks similar to another game. And then so the main aspect that I can take sort of these cubes and then I can position them elsewhere.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, there's nothing to tell me that this is a gun of any sort.
To me, it looks like a camera, but I know. Everybody's, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you take those.
Yeah, so I think this is what people are saying when they say this is like the main element of the like mechanic of the game. I didn't quite get that right, but like so when you kept mentioning like the preoccupation with the square as a form, I thought it was interesting because like if this is sort of the main mechanic, right? Like I have this gun now that like sort of stays with me, right? Like I can't get rid of it unless I'm in the antechamber.
Yeah.
So and the whole point of this gun is that it takes up these cubes of the environment, you know, and then like repositions them elsewhere. I don't know if that's actually okay. No. Right, and then like the guide to okay, so one more for like helping you navigate the space.
Did you stop that wall?
Yeah, because
okay.
it's stuck there.
Got it.
So if I put
the cube's always blue.
When I pick them up with this, they do. I can show you like where I can get more cubes. So this is the place where you're saying like, oh, like logic 101, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So this is sort of seems to be a tutorial, and then you like find things like this appears to be some window of some sort because I can't. Let's see. So if I take this and then I try to go past it, I can't. So you know, so and then if I block this, then I can go through and things like that. So places I can get more cubes. So this one, so this is a green, again, like, you know, the after image effect, and then falling down to something.
Have you found a kind of coherent logic to the different, like, color fields? Because it's not mapped like the runaway, right? It's not like, green for the,
for
kitchen and red for the, dining room, right? It's not a kind of, like, structure of the world according to color. In fact, the spaces tend to be primary color, right? Blue, green, red. Are there any yellow spaces? Are there any fully purple spaces? I think that's used more as a detail.
I could go look around. I don't think so.
So it's not just primary colors, but it's interesting the ones that seem to sort of be able to take up more space.
I know that. There is like a purple space-ish room I can show, but it's. I noticed that like oftentimes if they want to like signify like danger of falling, they'll like put the red, which like when I look at it, I immediately think like like incinerator, but there's nothing to imply that other just in the color.
That's interesting. So you're telling me that all the violence comes in the little sort of cartoons instead of the like symbolic.
Well, when I was falling, there's violence in the sound too.
Is there? Okay.
So when I was falling down that area, there was definitely like this like whoosh of like air falling, and like this hard like landing.
Yeah.
And also, I think that like with the sound, it's the dissonance, kind of like in Upstream Color, where there was sort of like this weird pairing of the sound and color. I think was also where some of the violence came from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just watched a film. Oh, I watched a documentary called Tickled. I'm writing about tickling right now. Have you seen this documentary?
I've heard about it. Yeah.
You'd find it super interesting.
Yeah.
It's soundtrack. There's a soundtrack for Upstream Color.
Oh really? This is the documentary about like he finds these like tickling things and then it's like a weird like
it's like a weird internet thing.
Yeah.
It's sort of about shaming and aggression on the internet and anonymity, but it's actually really interesting. But yeah, it uses Upstream Color for some reason, which is curious. Yeah.
Interesting.
But those flies.
It says fly ? But then like I find that so like. But when I take it, it turns from green into blue here. So I think there's also like a yellow gun, which we found but we couldn't figure out. So the mechanic of this room is like, like I can create a bridge.
Okay.
But yeah, again, like so you're asking about like, is it always blue? Yeah. So it's. Let me see if I can find the other place. Where you're asking about like secondary colors, here. So then, like, so, you know, I can't walk across here, and this sort of like bubbly. And sort of like bubbly soda field means that I can't take things out of it. Like I can only use it in this space. And then there's sort of like a pairing room. I'm not sure if this is a hole or not. You know, like. I guess I came from up there. That's probably how I found it.
Did you die in this game?
No. And then the times where you get stuck, right? It's you can always escape back to the antechamber.
Okay.
Yeah. So and then this is sort of the same thing, right?
That looks looks like the cube. It really does. That really looks like what time does to film stuff.
Yeah.
Like the sort of like flickers and glitches and scratches. it's impossible for me to watch that and not really think about that. It's quite beautiful, but it also really looks like a weird, like, digital imagining of what decayed celluloid would look like if you've never seen decayed celluloid,
Oh, that's interesting. Because when I looked at this, it looked like some sort of like soda or like some gas thing. But like, especially if you're looking at it in like the context of like a frame, right? Yeah. Oh man.
So wait, so you can walk around that. You can make like a sort of S pattern.
Yeah, except there's a hole. Except
okay.
There's a hole.
Ah, okay.
Right. So like if I like try to walk through,
you'll fall down.
Yeah. And
now where are you?
What appears impossible may have a very simple answer. Maybe there's. Oh, so now
you're back to here. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, and then let's see. So yeah. Except it's not the same geometry and things like that. But like this is without the color. You're right. Like the entire game would look like sort of this view. Right? Yeah. And then since I think that I don't know since I haven't played the game, but I think that the different colored guns have different like, powers.
Okay.
In some sense, so I think color is very intentionally used as well. But I haven't been able to find any sort of mapping or anything like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. We always want color to function as a kind of like predictive symbology. Like right. I mean we talked about this in the class all the time, right? It'd be so nice if red always meant anger, or if the purple gun always did X. But actually, color is most interesting when it is precisely the thing that like confounds systems, right? It confounds our expectations for predictability. And from watching you play this for half an hour, it seems like this is precisely something that's invested in like the juxtaposition of predictability, right? Or sort of form, and the fact that you can always escape back to a schematic and a diagram of things, while simultaneously totally confounding your expectations, right? Producing loops that are non-productive and things like that. So I buy it. I buy that this would be a game that would be interested in color as a kind of conceptual problem for naming that kind of mix of what maps the world and what totally frustrates the map or the following of the map, Yeah.
And then I kind of want to go back to the thing about the spatial aspect, where it seemed that like perception of color seemed to be tied with like space also not following it. Like I'm trying to connect it to like James's argument, where he's sort of maybe we shouldn't be looking at color over time, but color over space. Yeah.
And I mean, again, the relation between color and space here is incredibly weird, right? Those fuzzy edges make it impossible. They make it impossible to imagine touching it, and color bonded to an object makes it possible to imagine like grasping it and taking possession of it. But that diffusion actually makes it really hard to imagine it sort of being a property of an object. And so I think you're absolutely right, like thinking about it as a problem not just of like temporal unfolding, but here as a problem of like spatial integrity, right? That like the ontology of objects doesn't actually include the containment of color.
Right.
Yeah. And then it's playing with it, right? Because also like the cubes that you're sending out are just cubes of color. Right. So what's actually being projected into the world is like less a thing than a kind of like color field,
Although it doesn't have the same like.
It doesn't have the same blur.
Blur, yeah.
Does it ever like come into contact with something and like explode?
Maybe that's a different gun.
Yeah. I don't know. What's happening in the background there?
So this one was like I like. There's this eye motif that also comes up a lot. So like I stared at it and then sort of like dissolving away. I'll show you another one where it happens. So I don't really know what this is. Like this sort of like bubble of stuff sort of happens quite a bit. So the way to get across this room is that if I walk normally, it sort of dissolves away.
Yeah.
And one thing interesting is that in the menu, it talks about like your default speed is running.
Yeah.
Whereas normally it's the other way around.
Okay.
So I have to hold something and then sort of like walk across, and then
like polemically slowly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, like it seems to interact with the movements, right? I've seen a couple of these around, and I don't really know what to make of it. Right, so let's walk across here, and then right, like when I'm moving really fast, it's sort of doing this.
Got it.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of those, but I wanted to show like the eye motif and like again like this aspect of perception.
Yeah.
So I guess there are it's like this secondary color of like. So I can also like interact with this space, but it's sort of regrowing. Maybe this has something to do with the yellow gun. Not really sure, but yeah, these lasers and stuff.
I'm also interested, right? If you go back to that box in the middle,
This one
there, yeah, right. It's using color also to spell out up. Whereas word, yeah, I mean the relationship of color to word here would be interesting for you to sort of think about. Because color has been, I mean, most of the words have been the sort of black and white text in the boxes on the other side.
Well, there's also like like fly question mark.
Yeah, I guess there is. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see if the words that are given form and color are really different than the words that are given in the kind of like normal typography. I don't know. I'd be curious if you could do something.
There's also like the pixelization aspect, right? Because they're inherently just cubes. They're going to be blockier, whereas the black and white text that happens in the Antichamber is very sort of like script. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like if we go back there, right? Yeah. This just
not script, but sort of plain. Yeah.
Yeah. There is this sort of like exit, which I want to. Let me see if I can remember how to get there. Right, and it's also funny about like how do I get there is just it's not it would normally feel easy to like, oh, I'm given a map, except this isn't helpful at all.
No, I really like that idea that like instead of color providing you with a way of like navigating the world, it gives you another sort of confounding factor.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you're spot on. This is what you said a couple weeks ago. This is not accidental that this is a film or a game. Sorry. Yeah, that's super interested in color.
Yeah.
Given what it's sort of doing with like spatial confusion, but also graphic confusion. I'm really interested in the sort of juxtaposition of circles and these boxes. Yeah.
And then, right.
Is this one of those things where if you walk through the whole...
I think it is. I wanted to show this part where you actually can go
to the other side of the...
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, and then you like see this because you saw this exit from there.
Yeah.
And the text on that is not boxy like the rest. Maybe because it's in this sort of like antechamber aspect, and of course over here it's like life isn't about getting to the end. It's also sort of a dark one. But let's see. I don't remember. Oh.
And then you enter that space.
Which is sort of like where we were, except now, like, you remember when we were there, it was sort of going back to that point, and now it's sort of in this sort of...
Yeah, what happens if you go up to the stained glass, go to the right? There, like if you go up to that and then go back. So that does not actually, that's interesting, it's the inverse of what we saw before, where you go up to the sort of stained glass figure, and then when you proceed, the color...
Here's how, like, right, because, like, in here it's just, like, a plain whiteness, but then, now going in here, it still has, and now we're on the other side.
Okay.
You remember we were from there.
Yeah,
and we're like, so, right, like, different mechanic of, like, going up and walking through and having the field of view.
I mean, I also wonder if part of what it's trying to do with color is point out the sort of, like, inherent perspectivalism of color, right? That, the green that I see may be up this part of the spectrum, right? And then you may see a green that's sort of much lighter, right? That is the fundamental, like, ontological instability of color. That we actually, when we say green, we're not actually seeing the same exact perceptual thing.
And I like that because then if you apply it to space, that's sort of, right, like the idea of space can change depending on what actions you're doing, right? If you walk across something versus jumping across something, it's different.
Can I nerd out for 1 second?
Yeah.
So Sartre has a passage called The Look, like a chapter in Being and Nothingness, where he talks about being at a park. And he says, I'm at a park and I'm looking at these objects in the world. I'm looking at like a bench and I'm looking at like a tree. And they are, a couple meters from me and they're a couple meters from each other. And now there's something else in the space. As long as I'm the only person there, these things are all unfolding from my point of view. In other words, space exists for me, from me, in relation to how I see things. But as soon as, let's say, that third object is actually another person, that person also sees the tree and the bench. And what I see is that for that person, space unfolds from their perspective. And so as soon as I see another person, he says, the world becomes a sinkhole. And I realize that, like, my perception is not govern the givenness of the world. Like, I can't say that bench is 2 meters away. It's only 2 meters away from me. That person has a kind of perceptual field that unfolds from them as well. And as a result, I realize that in fact, like, the world is not formed, right? Because there are other perceiving beings in the world. So it's interesting, right? I like that idea that the sort of like mandatory looking from another perspective is precisely to realize that there's no world that we navigate. It's only, you know, my contingent sort of perspective on the world, for which somebody else has their own contingent perspective, neither one of which is sort of true. So I lose the sense that the whole world is formed, you know? And color likewise, right? Green, I can't speak of green as an objective quality. What you perceive, what I perceive, is literally going to be just slightly different. It's going to range over that spectrum of blur, you know?
I also really like that because I guess for lots of reasons. One is, I guess, like from the science perspective, right? Where for like the quantum mechanics, like the idea that you don't know exactly where a particle is or like how fast it's moving, like the very act of observation sort of changes like what's happening. And so that's sort of like, as you're going from like classical physics to like quantum, that's sort of like the change that happens at the act of like observation or measurement, which seems to fit right in with, you know,
it fundamentally distorts the object that you would ostensibly be sort of thinking about or capturing, right?
Yeah. And then the other thing that I find interesting is because so there's single player games, right? Like the fact that normally this is intended to be played as like a single person is going through this, right, and is like experiencing these weird things. The idea of like streaming is sort of new, because if you wanted someone to come watch the game you were playing, right, it would have to be like here. I'd have to come over and like bring the game, or you'd come to my house and then we'd watch it. But now that like you can stream things, so anybody can like experience what you're going through, and then also like change it by offering their input.
Yeah.
I found that there's some games that like feel like more intended for a single person. So like I'm trying to talk and explain about this game, and the game's constantly like providing narration or things, and I don't want to talk over it because I want the viewers to hear it. And so like this game as like a single person experience, because Sartre, right, was talking about like as soon as another person comes in, like you realize that the space is not for you. Whereas this game is sort of like insisting that it's not for you, even though you are a single person.
In its own design. Yeah. That's really cool. And I think that color is it makes sense to me that you would use color to present that idea, because it names the problem of perspective and, you know, perception and the way that language doesn't necessarily in fact line up with sort of like knowable fixed things in the world. Yeah. Oh man. No, that's cool. I love it. I've learned a lot from you today, but also like you're completely right that it's beautiful.
Yeah.
I like that idea, Lily. The sort of problem of like the game for you, that's also not for you, and the way in which this is something that like you have to privately navigate. And also, most of the figures are like single figures, except for ones that are premised on like sort of trickery and deceit, right? Like the coin, like the coin covering the coin unfolding. But I like that, in fact, it's not other people that trick you here. It's like the conditions of perception. Yeah, right? Like,
it's the shape. It's like the fact that you can like go through here.
It's form.
Yeah,
right?
it's form.
Exactly, is what can sort of like set you awry, as opposed to like other people's, I don't know, agency and things like that. Yeah.
I also kind of like it because it seems weird in like the description you were talking about of like, you know, Sartre being at the park, is that, you know, what makes a person, you know, the fact that another person comes into the frame be the weird things. And like, I guess you could say it's like would it be the same with like an animal walked in, because they also have a perception involved? But then this is
no.
Right. but then like in here it's like the objects themselves in this constructed space, right? Like the map, the schematic is not helpful to you. The even the like rewards you get for solving a puzzle are sort of like pretty dark and sort of like poking fun at you. Yeah.
Which is, well, and also like all the little aphorisms are about like non-teleological gain, right? Like it's not about success, and it's not about end, and it's not about this, and it's not about like accumulation. Instead, it is really about the like perceptual experience of feeling space unfold, but not for you. You know?
Yeah.
Which I think some of the things we talked about in the color class are totally related to that, in the sense that color is always at risk of like obliterating subjectivity, being too excessive, being too beautiful, and that things like systems and lines can't actually contain it. That's really cool.
Yeah.
It's super cool. It's super beautiful. I also the graphic forms in it. You're absolutely right. Are really stunning. Like so again, the mix of like round lines, and the sort of like return to squares and cubes and frames.
Like for this, right? It's a very like slight thing compared to this like big box.
Well, it looks like the sort of the traditional form of like stained glass windows against what looks like a like I don't know, sort of like
something industrial.
Industrial,
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, I think this is partly. I think the reason I feel this like sterile lab aspect is that this game is sort of drawing a lot from, but like I'm not sure if Hidabel, who like also hasn't really played games, would feel this as much of like. Actually, she's played that game, but of like you're in a lab space and like this is inherently a gun. Like I can imagine if I also showed this to someone who's this is their first game, especially because like a lot of like mainstream games, it's the first person shooter is like one of the most popular genres, which nominally this is, right?
Although it's interesting, right, because this is from a sort of anamorphotic angle. I mean, to actually like. If that is that like the sightline, because to actually engage it as a sightline, you'd have to actually basically take yourself out of the straight-on perceptual vision.
That's like a common thing for like these first-person shooter games is that like often like the weapons are up here.
Okay.
Right, because like in your field of view, this makes sense, right? Because it's like, oh, I need to know what weapon I have.
Yeah.
But like actually, someone running like this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that's interesting. But that's another way in which the sort of sight lines don't line up, like the space doesn't line up. And I realize that may be part of the sort of normal design. And again, I'm a complete sort of ignorant viewer of this, but it is interesting. It's interesting in part, since we have the green here, because it sort of looks like the kind of like opposite side of the image of like Holbein's ambassadors, where there's like a death's head.
Yeah, right.
Anamorphosis at the bottom, right?
Yeah.
It's cool.
I think also while we're talking about glass, I'll go to the other side.
Miguel, are you out there? Sorry, I didn't see you come by. Give me just one more second, and then Sorry, Lily, I'll have to.
No
wrap
worries.
Up, but
so if you're looking through sort of the stained glass in that aspect, you kind of see that it's following the shape of the map. Like, let's zoom in a little bit more. Do you see that? That like there's this other
on the
line.
level of the dark glass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what to make of it, other than just like, is that sort of like the space that comes out, and then the fact that there needs to be this like mediation for you to see what's going on. Yeah,
that's cool. I have no idea. But I think that's really interesting.
And then also like escape, and then you're just sort of like on the opposite side of it.
Yeah.
So I guess from your perspective, like. In terms of like media specificity, do you think like why does this have to be a game? Is it because you're going through like this spatial thing? Because I guess one thing I'm thinking about is The Shining, which I've read also like if you think about the hotel geometry, doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and in fact, you have multiple layers. So you've got the hotel geometry, which doesn't make any sense, and then you have the maze outside, the kind of labyrinth, and then you also have like the sort of mise en abîme sort of like model of the labyrinth, which Kubrick likes to sort of dissolve from like the sort of like miniature into the entire thing. And then you also have this sense of sort of like cognitive like encircling, right? The sort of like all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, right? The sense of sort of like inescapable sort of labyrinthine structures. I mean, on the one hand, the question of navigability and the freedom to choose, I mean, that obviously is part of the sort of like ludic participatory component of it, right? That you can sort of decide which way to go. But I will also say I do think there are highly cinematic things that you're seeing here. In particular, the idea that like color can overtake your sort of like perceptual range, and that it can therefore become like literally your field of vision, right? That it becomes sort of glasses, and it's playing with that, right? The red and the blue next to each other that looks so much like polarized lenses, and 3D. It seems like it's very much playing with the history of like color sort of obliterating perception. Or sort of literally lensing perception in sort of film history. Yeah. But I think it's in dialogue with really interesting things that have happened with color. I think it's not an accident that you would be sort of particularly drawn to this aesthetically. And then the one difference would simply be the capacity to sort of like move through spaces, deciding which ones to sort of like retreat from and things like that. Yeah. But the fall into color, I mean, this reminds me in some ways more of the things that we talked about, like Leaving Las Vegas, that were precisely about, like, again, perceptual distortion, which again you tend to see in drug films, you tend to see in like films about like madness. And what's interesting here is that it's juxtaposing all of those things and using color to do it while still coming back to like this rigid schematic. Yeah. I have to take another meeting. I'm so sorry, but this was super fun. And you're absolutely right. From the trailer, I would not have gotten this. So thank you so much for coming to show me. It was amazingly cool. You're going to write about this, right? Like, I get to see you, take time away from your PhD and go and write about color. I would be so happy.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out sort of like how to balance it.
Yeah.
I think once like the immediate paper deadlines like stop coming up, then I'm going to be a lot more like figuring out how to. Also, like now that I've got like a citation manager going for my paper, I'm just feeling like, I can like pull all of my notes together and like have something more sorted instead of like across several different notebooks.
Good. That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you have time, but I really think you should.
Okay.
I think this would be awesome. Again, there's not a lot that's been written on color, right? Some, and you read most of it. But especially like color in games, that's not just sort of like purely descriptive, but it's trying to generate like theories related to phenomenology and movement. I think you should do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have some other games that I was like thinking about because like also for the paper, right, for your class, and you encouraged me to write about games, and I was like, I hadn't played this yet, and I was like, I really don't know any games that do anything interesting because there are very many games that are pretty, but it's not like the same playing with it that like
theorizing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
can I just unplug this or will that cause problems?
Oh yeah, I can unplug it.
Yeah, really?
All right.
Okay.